So, welcome to the beginning of the end, right? This is your last week, certainly in this class. And before I get started with what we're going to do today with architectural perspectives, I want to spend a little bit of time talking about what's happening in the next week or so, recognizing that this class ends a week from today. And I do need to confirm the final time and make sure it's not a different time because final schedule is different. We will have everything due on Monday. I believe that the final starts like normal at 6, but I'll double check. It will only be 2 hours. So bear with me while I look that up. I should have looked it up ahead of time. I've never taught the night class before, so it's a different time than I'm used to. But your final portfolio will be due, time to be filled in, on Monday. And what you'll do is you'll come in and we'll put your portfolios on the back table back there. And I leave them out so that everybody can see everybody else's portfolio, just so that, because that tends to be what people enjoy doing. At the same time, I'll have a handout that you'll get. On that handout will be a link to a survey online. I used to do paper surveys, but found it was much easier to collate the data after the fact if it was online. The other thing is that I have no way of recognizing who you are unless you tell me who you are, which I don't want you to do, so it can be completely anonymous. Which is a good thing. I'll ask you a bunch of targeted questions about what you thought of the class, what you thought needed improvement, did you like certain assignments, would you rather do something else, and that helps guide the way the class goes. I change assignments based on that kind of feedback, and it tends to be extraordinarily useful. So I sincerely appreciate it. That will be part of your task on Monday, a week from today. So you'll turn in your portfolio, you'll look at the other people, you'll fill out the survey, and then I always bring donuts. So I will bring donuts, and you can have a donut. At the end of the final period, whenever that is, for the sake of argument, let's say it's at 8. But I'll double check the exact time because I'm not used to this time frame of class. That will be the official end of class, which means that you can't turn anything in or do any extra comments or anything after that point. So anything you do after the end of the final period won't count towards your grade. So any regrades that you want done, any missing exercises that you want to post, anything like that has to be done prior to the end of that final time. I will do my best to do the grading very quickly. I'll try to do it on Wednesday, so that you guys can have your grades back and you can move on and have a good summer, etc. Okay? So I try to have it turned back in very quickly. At least that's my goal in moving forward. So that's the way next Monday will work. And like I said, I'll look up exactly when the final time is. Not something I'm familiar with. So we'll do that. And then today we're going to work on doing architectural perspectives, and I'll kind of talk you through that. Remember that the perspective is one of the 4 views that you're going to be, one of the 3 potential views that you'll be turning in. So as your assignment 106, which is due on Wednesday, you have to pick 3 of 4 views, right? So we did an elevation, we did a plan, we did a section, and we're doing a perspective today. You're going to pick 3 of those 4 and turn them in as your assignment 106. The exercises are, you're free to do whatever you want. You can experiment. It doesn't matter how they look. Obviously, the assignment, you're graded on how they look, right? So you might want to do a little bit of editing versus your exercise work versus your assignment work. But they kind of go hand in hand. And I do that because I want to give you plenty of time in class to work on your actual assignments. Okay, so much of what we'll do today is habitual practice, since we've been doing it for the last 4 days, and you'll be used to it. But at the same time, there'll be a few other little pieces. So remember that is due on Wednesday. You have to have it turned in, and so that's the last outstanding piece. A number of people asked me the total number of comments that are required for this class this year, or in this particular semester. Total number of comments will be 78. So as long as you have more than 78 comments, you'll get 100% on the comment section. If you have less than that, remember that the comments are due on the last day of class. So if you're behind on comments, no big deal. You just have to make comments. Comments take time, though. So be aware that you're not going to be able to just bust out 50 comments in the last hour before the final's over. You got to kind of think through this. Actually, the website won't even let you do that because it'll tell you that you're commenting too fast. You may have run into that before. So you have to take your time. You have to make good quality comments as you go forward. Okay, so let me just, for a quick second, let me look up when the final time is so that I can make sure that I can tell you the exact time that we should be meeting. So hold on a second. Okay, so it says that we hold our final at the same time as regular class, so that's good. So we will hold it from 6 to 8 on Monday, right? The end of everything will be at 8. I'm not going to go until 9. There's no reason to keep you guys 3 hours here as part of your final. So it will be over at 8. That will be the official end of class next Monday, which means that you can't turn anything in after 8 on Monday, the 23rd. Okay? I just want to make sure that's nice and clear. You know what the plan is. You know that you're going to come here and eat donuts and be happy, right? Okay. It's actually kind of interesting because I have 3 classes. I think I'm going to have to order like 8 dozen donuts or something. It'll be quite entertaining. So anyway. Okay, so today we're going to start working through architectural perspectives. It's very, very similar to everything that we've been doing in doing the elevation or the plan or the section. We're going to go through the same process. The difference is that instead of going straight into the world of SketchUp and immediately starting with our perspective view, we're instead going to go try to find the image first. And if we were doing this on a real site, where we were going on a site visit, we would actually take the image, we'd take the perspective view, and we'd be working with that particular image. But in the case here, we're going to have to do a search for our image. So I'm going to go ahead and go to my Creative Commons search, and I'm going to type in Yosemite Meadow. And in conjunction with this decision about which picture I'm going to use as part of my collage, I need to understand how my building is oriented and where the sun is. So let me look at it kind of down, and I'm going to switch back into the very basic hidden line mode so that we have just lines available. And I'm going to turn on my shadows really quick. And what I want to be able to discern is where do the shadows tend to fall in my view. And so because north is on this side and I want to see the north side of my building, when I swing the shadows around, they're always going to be toward me, right? And either toward me to the right or toward me to the left. And so I have to make sure that I'm paying attention to where these shadows are in relation to selecting my actual final view. So I'm going to jump back to my views here, or my meadows, and I'm going to be looking for an image that has the sun, right, coming toward me. So something like this, for example, right? I could see a little bit of the streak of the sun here coming toward me. I can look at the shadows. They're coming slightly toward me. If I look at the shadow of this tree, it's slightly to the front. Okay? It's almost noon in this particular view, so the shadows are going to be rather short. It might not be the most dramatic view. So if I continue on here, something like this is not a bad choice. I have a strong shadow here coming toward me, but I don't really like all this vegetation in the front. It's too big, too thick. The scale isn't quite right. So I'm going to keep going and keep looking. Okay, something like this view, for example, right? We end up with long shadows going to the right, kind of back and to the right. Not quite right for my orientation. So I'm going to keep searching. And again, part of the reason that I'm pointing this out is because it does take some time to find the right image, right? And it's worth your time to keep going until you find that perfect image. Right, it's amusing. This morning I found the first image within the right image within maybe 3 images. So we're going to keep going here. This one might work. And sometimes the best strategy is to keep looking and then to open them behind you. Okay, so this one very blatantly is a strong sunset, very low on the horizon. This would certainly work for my particular image, but I did collect a few more. This one's not too bad. The sun's going to be kind of over here to the right side, slightly out of the page. We can see the shadow coming down there. This one is nice. The sun is there. We see a nice shadow. I think maybe I'll use this one. The only problem with this image is the space that I have for my building is going to be a little bit back, so my building is going to be rather small in comparison to the overall size of this image. Let's see if there's a better one here. Actually, I might use this one. I think this will work. So let me go ahead and download this image. And I'm going to go ahead and show it in my folder here. And I'm going to copy this image into my flash drive for today. And we'll do, and I'm going to go ahead and paste this image in place, or paste it into my folder there. I want to open that image in Photoshop. So let me go ahead and open with Photoshop. And now I'm going to look at this image and I'm going to say, okay, this is roughly noon, right? But my shadow is going to be coming very vertical, but slightly to the left side here. So when I go to my view, or my SketchUp view, and I start to look at my shadows, right? I'm going to adjust my shadows to be slightly after noon, right? And it's probably right about like that. Okay? If I orient my view a little bit, we'll be able to see the shadows coming down. And as I get more at ground level, we'll see the kind of shortness of shadow there. So that looks pretty good. So the next piece of this, right, is typically the photograph that's taken, something like this, is taken roughly at eye level. Okay? That's a generally good assumption. So SketchUp has a great built-in tool to help us with this. And if we go over on the large tool set, similar to where the section tool is, there's a little person standing on top of a red X. It's called the position camera tool. If we click on the position camera tool, we can then put ourselves into the scene. So if I click here, it will zoom in and put the camera at eye level such that I'm looking at my particular building. Okay? And I can use the next choice is the look around tool, which is right here. And I can choose where this needs to fall as part of my view. So if I'm looking at this, for example, here, I'm going to flip over and kind of look at my general view here. Yeah, it looks pretty close. Okay? I'm going to be able to take this large image right here. The shadows are down. I might need to adjust the shadows slightly back toward noon, maybe a little bit more like that. I could also adjust the time of year, right, to shorten up the shadows a bit, maybe something like that. Okay? So now that I have this view established, one of the things that helps when we do our general orientation is to turn on one of the views with a sky. And what this does is it gives us where the natural horizon line is and will help me line up my work in the final view. So I'm going to start by exporting this view, which is not something I'll use that's part of my final output, but it'll work temporarily to help me kind of line up my views. So I'm going to go to File and then Export 2D Graphic. And I'm going to save this one into my flash drive. And we'll say this is exercise 130. And this is, we'll call it color for right now. Under my options, I want to make sure that I'm still at the 4,000 pixels wide. And then I'll go ahead and export. And when I go over into the world of Photoshop and I go to File and then Place, and I drop that colored image on, right here, right, I can take this image and I can turn that image into a multiply blending mode so that I can kind of see through a little bit. And you guys, do you see that line? I can show you right here. That line right there, that represents the horizon line. So what I need to do is I need to make that match up roughly with where that horizon line naturally occurs as part of this meadow. So it's about there. And as I do that, right, I can start to see that my building is not too tall. Right? It doesn't feel like it's floating, and it doesn't feel like it's small. Right? So I need that line to kind of line up. If I'm having trouble seeing it, right, we'll place it right in there. I'm going to go slightly higher, because this looks like it's looking downhill slightly for me. Okay? And I'll place that image right in there. And if we want to see what it looks like a little bit better, right, we can turn this back to normal, and I can adjust the opacity, and you can kind of see where it falls as part of my building here. Looks reasonable. Okay? So again, that image is not particularly valuable toward the final output. I want to go back into my SketchUp file. Now that I know that this image works and the perspective works and I feel comfortable with it, now it's time to go through and do all of my same exports. So I'm going to first save the view so that I can come back to it. So I'll go into Scenes, I'll click on the plus icon, and I'm going to call this Perspective 03. 03. And there it is. That way I can come back to it. And then I'll go into my Styles menu, and I'm going to go back to the Hidden Line style, and I'm going to turn off Shadows. I'm going to turn off Guides. I'm going to turn off Axes. And now I have just the line drawing, which is what I want. From here, I'll go to File, Export, 2D Graphic. And I'm going to save this as the lines version. And I'll go ahead and export. Then I'll move over into my Edit mode, and I could turn on the X-ray view. I found this morning that I didn't really like the X-ray view, but I'll do this as an export, and you guys can see what it looks like just in case. So I'll go to File, Export, 2D Graphic, and I'm going through these rather quickly because we've done this over and over again for 4, 5 exercises, so it should be rather routine right now. Oops, X-ray. Perfect. We'll turn off the X-ray, and then I'm going to switch over into my edges, turn off my edges, and turn on my shadows only. So let me go to View, and then Shadows, right there. And I'm going to go to File, Export, 2D Graphic. We'll call this Shadows. Perfect. And I'll go ahead and click on Export. And then we'll turn off the shadows. So once again, View Shadows. And actually, I can just switch from here into my sketchy edges. And I'm going to do the airbrush with endpoints. And I have to make sure that I turn off the section cuts and the section planes and the guides, if SketchUp will let me here. There we go. And then I'll go to File, Export, 2D Graphic. And we'll save this one as airbrush. And the last one is the pen gray. Right here. And again, I have to turn off the guides and the section cuts and the section planes. There it is. And I'll go to File, Export, 2D Graphic. And this is the pen gray. And I'll go ahead and export. So now it's time to switch over into the world of Photoshop, and I'm going to place the rest of the images in, just like we've been doing. I'll go to File, and then Place, and I'll drop in, I'll start with the lines view. There it is. And Place. Now, this is a little bit different. Last time, we just placed all the images, and then we brought the background in and adjusted the background. In this instance, we're going to adjust the images. And so we have to pay a little bit of attention as we bring them in. And what you'll find is that it will naturally, as you drag it, it will naturally kind of jump to the edges of the image that we already placed. So it's kind of like a snapping effect. And so I'll go ahead and say OK on the lines, and then I'll go to File and Place, and I'm going to bring in each of the subsequent ones. So I've done the lines. Let's do the shadows. We'll let it kind of snap and snap. I'll go to File and then Place. Oops, I have to commit to it. Then I'll go to File and then Place. And I did the lines. Let's do the X-ray. And I'll go to File, Commit, File, Place. Do the airbrush. There. And the last one will be the pen gray. So I'll go to File, Place, and then we'll choose the pen gray. And there it is, like that. Okay? So I have all of those placed into my scene. And now it's time to take each of them and rename them and also turn them to multiply. So I'll switch through each of these, and we'll keep saying multiply. And there they all are. I'm going to go ahead at this point and turn off the color image because I don't need that one anymore. I have all of them shown here. Okay? And while we're here, I'm going to rename these layers. So let me rename this to lines, shadows, X-ray, airbrush. Oops, can't type. And pen gray. Okay, good. All of those have been renamed now. Okay. So the first thing that I need to do is I need to cut out for my building. So we'll turn everything off except for the lines, like that. And I need to do my first cutout of the building. So I'm going to use the magic wand tool. I'll select the outside of my building. I'm going to hold down let me make sure I'm on the lines view, sorry. There it is. I'm going to hold down Shift to select this extra area there. And I want to zoom in, and I want to make sure there's no part of my building that looks all the way through. This morning I had a little strip that was right there, but the way the perspective is, it hides that little strip. So I'm not going to worry about it. But if there was something that went all the way through my building, I'd want to select that as well. I'll turn on the background layer, making sure that I'm on the background layer. It's locked right now, so I can't actually work with it. So I'm going to go ahead and right-click and say Layer from Background. Now I can work on that layer. And I'll click on the Add Layer Mask button, just like we've been doing. And that then cuts out my building. So if I press Control- here, we can see that my building is cut out. But it doesn't really feel like it's part of the scene just yet, because it's sitting on top of the scene. It's cut out and just sitting there. So first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to use the grass brush to make this building feel like it's part of the scene. Okay? So I would go straight to my clone stamp. And using the grass brush, which is currently selected, it would be natural to come in here, hold down Alt, and start trying to copy, okay, which I can do. Okay? Now, unfortunately, it's working because I'm on top of my layer mask, but I don't really want to do it that way. Instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to right-click on this layer mask, and I'm going to say Apply Layer Mask, which is going to permanently apply the layer mask to it, like that. So it becomes one image. Then I'll drag this up to the very top so that it's layer 0. Notice nothing changes in the image just yet. At this point, I'll go ahead and I'll copy, or excuse me, I'll use my clone stamp, hold down Alt, and I'm going to start covering the front edge with grass. And you see that when I do that, the line down here at the bottom goes away. And that's important. If the line stays there, it will never feel like it's part of the overall scene. I made a copy there of the same little rock, which is going to be problematic. So let me take Alt, and I'm going to copy over the top of that way. OK, so I've done that first edge. Now, as I start to come over here, you'll see that the line goes away from me. The perspective line goes away. So the grass in the front is going to be larger than the grass in the back. So as I go back along this, so maybe we'll go straight along there, I'm going to shrink down my brush. So we'll go across that piece, like that. And now I'll shrink down my brush a little bit more as I go back this direction. So I'm deliberately changing how tall my grass is as it goes back in perspective, because the grass further away would be smaller. Okay? So we'll make the grass a little bit bigger. This comes toward me, so let's make the grass a little bit bigger. Again, I'll hold down Alt to copy from, and we'll make the grass a little bit bigger there. And then we can go across this front side. All right. The grass brush is very, very forgiving. All right. So we'll continue along here. Cover that up nicely. Like that. I'm going to make it a little bit bigger still for this section, because it's coming toward us a little bit. And then I'll make it smaller for that section. Like that. We'll come over here. We'll work our way out. And we'll go like that. So now if I press Control 0, you can see that the building already now feels like it's part of the scene versus floating on top of the scene. So it's starting to feel grounded, but I need to take this a little bit further still. Okay? So the next piece of the puzzle is the shadow. And I'm going to spend a lot of time with this shadow and making sure that it looks right. So right now, I don't see the shadow on the ground because the background layer is on top of the shadow layer. So let me take the shadow layer and put it on top of the background layer. Now I see the shadows. Okay? The problem with the shadows is it's a very sharp edge. And this would work fine if we were in an urban environment where there was paving on the ground or something that was sharp edged. We'd have a sharp edged shadow. But here, in a field, we need something that's a much softer edge to the shadow. So I'm going to turn off the background for a second. And I'll actually turn off the line so we have just the shadows showing. And so what I need to do is I need to change the front edge of this shadow so that it feels like it's more grass. So I'm going to use the same grass brush tool, but this is currently a smart object. It's something that I placed into the scene. So before I can edit this object, I need to right-click on it and say Rasterize Layer. Excuse me. Right-click on the layer and say Rasterize Layer. That goes away, and now I can use the clone stamp with the grass brush. So I'm going to zoom in a bit. I'm going to hold down Alt to copy from the white area here, and I'm going to work my way along the front. Okay, the front edge of this shadow. So you can see that I'm creating a little bit of grass right along the front, and when I turn on the background, you can see that it softens the edge of that shadow. It's not nearly as sharp anymore, which is the ultimately what I'm going for. Okay? I'm going to come back and do that, but before I do that, I want to work on the back edge of the shadow too. So I'm going to hold down Alt to copy from the gray. I'm going to make my brush a little bit smaller here. We'll zoom in. And I'm going to soften that line as well. So we'll go right along that edge as well. Sometimes it's easier to work from the back forward, which is why I'll do that gray first. So let me hold down Alt. And we're going to come right along here and soften that edge as well. Hold down Alt. I have to keep holding down Alt to choose where I'm copying from. There's a little bit of a holdover that's come over in that particular piece. Hold down Alt. We'll work our way up here. Sometimes there are pieces that just get too thin to work on. That can necessitate having a little bit of a mask to control where we're doing it. So if I didn't want it to apply there, I could use a polygonal lasso to cut off that section. And now my clone stamp can only work within those bounds. So I can hold down Alt and I can do that with no fear that it's going to go across that boundary. Something like that. Let me go ahead and click off my selection, and I'm going to continue on with that clone stamp right along this edge. Okay, sometimes you make a mistake. That's because I copied from this area and I ran out of place to copy from. So we'll work our way along there, and we'll work our way along there. Okay, again, here's a context where I'm going to start making lines below that. So let me go ahead and polygonal lasso and choose the edge that I don't want to go beyond. like that. And I'll come back to my clone stamp. Again, hold down Alt to copy from here, and we'll work our way that way. Hold down Alt, and we can do that very edge. And nothing is going beyond that edge. Okay, so I'm using that temporarily. So we can continue along here. This is going to be very important along that edge to do this selection. So let me once again zoom out, polygonal lasso right along this edge right there. I'll go right along that edge. Like that. Now everything has to happen there. So we'll go back to my clone stamp. Hold down Alt to copy from right there, and we'll work our way in here like this. Hold down Alt, and we'll work our way along that section. Alt, and I just keep resetting where that grass brush is starting from so that I'm always working from within this nice gray context, and I can work my way along here. Maybe I'll work from there this time. And it's just a combination of continuing to press Alt, and pretty quick I'll have the whole thing covered up along that edge. Oops, that was a mistake. Let's go back. Where you run into trouble is when you don't have much room to copy from. Almost done. All right. Now I do actually have to continue this dark gray as I go out this edge. So I'll hold down Alt to copy from, and we'll work our way. Oops. Go back to the clone stamp here. And I'll work my way out. Oops, I keep. And if you need to see it in action here, you can always turn on that layer, and you can see how we're blurring the edge of this shadow. So I'll work my way out. Can't have anything below that line, so let's go ahead and mask this off. Like that. Clone stamp, Alt from there, and we'll work our way out to the very end. About like that. Okay, so now that I have the back edge dealt with, we're going to move to the front edge. The front edge tends to be the easier edge to work with. So I'll use my clone stamp. I'm going to copy from. I'm going to make my brush a little bit bigger. Hold down Alt. We're going to do white, and we're just going to run our way along the front edge of this here, which, like I said, tends to go a little bit faster as we go forward here. Like that. Let me zoom in here a little bit. Oh, there's a problem, right? We can't have that. We work across the front here, like so. And I need to fix a little bit more without selecting this part. So once again, I'll do the little mask. Oops. There. Clone stamp from down here. There we go. And I should have done the gray along this edge. So again, you have to kind of keep working back and forth. If I were to turn this on, you'll see that that's still too sharp of a line. It doesn't blend in well enough. But certainly you get the idea. As you work through this, you can see that you're taking the shadow and really making the shadow feel like it's part of the drawing. And so if I were to continue with the clone stamp, I could go right along this edge, soften that up. And obviously I'm not taking as much time as I probably should, but you get the idea. Right? Likewise, we need to do a little bit of the dark edge, so I'll hold down Alt, copy from. We can do it right there along that edge. Something like that. And let me cover that front up again. All right. We'll call it something like that. Okay, the point is that that shadow now feels like it's part of the ground rather than laying on top of the ground. So it takes time to get these shadows really looking the way you want them to look. Okay, so now I have the shadow done. We could turn back on the line so you can see the lines part of this. Okay, and it feels like it's part of the overall scene. So the next piece of the puzzle may be to add some collage texture or maybe something to the windows or something along that lines. So I want to show you how to apply a concrete texture to a wall in a perspective view, though it will take me too long to do all of the walls, so I'm not going to end up doing it for everything, but I at least want to show you how it works. Okay? So I'm going to go ahead and do a Creative Commons search for a concrete tiling texture. So I'll say concrete tiling texture. Okay? And I ended up doing these bricks because they're a pretty easy one to see, though something like this might work nicely. I'm just checking to see if there's something I like a little bit better. Yeah, maybe this one will work. We'll do this one. So let me go ahead and download the full size. And I want to copy it over into my folder. So let me right click and say copy. And we'll drop it into today's folder. We'll paste it. There it is. And now I'll go ahead and go back into Photoshop. And I'm going to go to File and then Place to bring this particular piece in. There it is. We'll go ahead and place it in. And I need to adjust the overall scale to match up with the approximate size of one of these panels. Right, so maybe it's about like that. And then we'll go ahead and go OK. And then I'm going to copy this using the rectangular marquee. I'll select it. Control-C to copy, Control-V to paste. And I'll end up with my second version of it. And I'll stick those two together. Then I'll press Control-V to paste another version of it. Control-V, I'll get another version of it. Control-V, another version. And I want way more than is actually required. Right? This is not the best tiling texture because we have these ribbons, but it's OK. OK, so I'm going to make sure that I have more than enough of these textures to cover the wall that I'm going to be working on. Okay, after I have those selected, I'll select all of them on a layer. I'll right-click on the layers and say Merge Layers, which puts them all into one layer. And historically, for the other views, all we've done is go to the Lines layer, select the pieces that would have the texture on it, these two pieces, go back up to my texture, and say Add Layer Mask. Okay? Which is fine. Certainly it applies to that part of the window. But you see that the lines in this are not in perspective. They don't feel like they belong as part of this view. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a step back. And I'm going to work with this layer for a little bit. And in order to see it better, I'm going to adjust the opacity down so we can kind of see through it a little bit. But hopefully to the point where I can still kind of see these lines. Okay? So with those lines showing, I'm going to go to Edit, Transform, and then Skew. And when I work with Skew, I'm going to get the top edge of this image to line up with the perspective. So see how that top edge now lines up with the top edge of my building? right? Likewise, I'm going to work with the bottom edge to line up with the bottom edge of my building. So I have to work it. These are going to be in line, and I'm going to keep making these smaller until they start to line up. So we'll pull this over, pull this one over, right? And I want that bottom line to line up with the bottom, just like the top to line up with the top. And if we look at this in its full opacity, you'll see that all of those lines are starting to go back in perspective. They match up with the building. So at this point, I can go ahead and say OK. And at this point, I will select, using the lines layer, this wall and this wall. I'll turn back on layer 8, and I'll click on the Add Layer Mask. Oops. Sorry, I have to be on layer 8. Click on the Add Layer Mask. And now that piece of texture feels like it's part of this wall. Okay? I will probably adjust this to be multiply so that we can see through it better. And I'll also put that below the background texture so that it's covered up by the grass that I've already established. Okay? And in this case, maybe it's a little bit strong in its color. Maybe I want to tone it down a bit, so I just adjust the opacity down, right, so it's not quite so strong. Okay? I'll go ahead and leave that there as part of this drawing, but I would spend a little bit more time and do it for each of the planes of the building, right, which obviously takes more time, should I want to do that as part of this drawing. It may be something that looks good. It may not be. It's for you to decide whether it's appropriate. I just wanted to show you the skew tool to get this particular piece into perspective. Now, maybe I wanted to do a reflection in the windows. Previously, we went and looked for a view of this particular, of the sky, for example, and just put the clouds in. Because it's a perspective, it would really be better to go with another image of a Yosemite meadow. So I chose this image. Ideally, I'd like another image that matches up, maybe this image that has the green grass as part of it. So let me go ahead and save this. Show it, and then copy it. And I'll go ahead and paste it. And let me open up Photoshop again. And I'm going to go ahead and place that into the scene. So I'll go to File and then Place. And I'll pick that version there. And let me go ahead and put it all the way on top of everything else. Say OK for right now. Put it all the way on top. Okay. And when I look at this, I'd really like it to be kind of the opposite view. It's not quite right for the reflection. So I'm going to go to Edit and then Transform, and I'm going to reflect horizontal so that I'm seeing this part of it. And then I'll go ahead and turn everything off except for the windows. And so we'll then go in and select anywhere that there's some glass. So maybe it's this, that, that. This is going to take a little bit of work because there's a few pieces that are harder to select. That, all of that selected now. One little stripe that's down there. Make sure that those are selected. OK, so I have all of those selected. Let me press Control 0. I'll go to my layer with the reflected background on it. And I'll go ahead and click on the Add Layer Mask. Okay. Now, the nice thing about this is that it's reflecting what it's seeing on the other side of the meadow. Now, obviously, I'm interpreting a little bit, because this, if we were at the scene, we'd have a picture that we shot going the other direction, so it would be easy to use that as the reflection, but we don't have that. The one other thing that's important is that you match up the horizon so that it's appropriate to your particular view. In this context, it's OK that it's a little bit tall, because the hill kind of slopes down away from us, so it would be natural for the hill to be a little bit taller on this edge. Okay? Now, it's probably a little bit strong as the reflection. It almost looks like I'm looking through the building. So let's make sure that we identify that this is definitely a reflection. So I'll soften it up a little bit. I could do even a hue adjustment to it. So let's go ahead and do a layer, new adjustment layer. I'll do a hue and saturation adjustment on it. And we'll swing this a little bit more into the blue side of things. I know it's adjusting my whole image, but I want it to apply only to the layer directly below it. So Control-Alt-G applies it just to that. And then we could see what looks right as part of it. Right, sometimes you have to kind of slide it a little bit. Maybe something like that. So it distinctly looks different than the background. Okay, so now I have those windows selected. Looks like I missed one little piece of glass right there. Let me select on the lines layer. I can select that one little piece. And because it's a mask, we can come back in. Hold on a second. And I can paint that piece back in that I missed. Okay? So now we have that little reflection that's part of it. Okay? Now it would be nice to add a little bit of entourage to this. So some people always are really good for scale. So I'm going to go to the Digital Tools website. Under Resources, Collage Images. I'm going to look for people. And I'm going to look for somebody that feels like they belong in this particular scene. And apparently that just links back to itself. Such is life. Maybe it's saying I really need a woman as part of this. Right? I don't want to do the dog walking. Right? Let's see here. Of course, right? Obviously I have to pick that, change that. So, well, sure, we'll do the dog. Why not? So there's the dog, right? One of the things that I need to be careful of, though, when I pick an image is I need to make sure that the shadow kind of matches up with my particular scene. And so in this context, the shadow's not the best. The shadow's on the right. I need the shadow to be on the left. But we'll try to make it work by mirroring this particular image. So I'm going to save all versions of this. I'm going to save the color version and the shadow version. So let me click on it, and we'll make it large. I'll right-click, and I'll say Save Image As. And we'll save it into today's folder. And then I'll also save the gray, which is what we're going to use as the shadow. Now this should be review, because if we go back in time, I think it was exercise 108 or 109, we had to do this where we integrated people into a scene. So this technique shouldn't be something that's entirely foreign to you. So let me go ahead, and I'm going to drop these people in. So let me go to File and then Place, and I'll put the person walking the dog in first. Okay? I'm going to, before I go too far, I'm going to go to Transform, and I'm going to flip horizontal, right, so that the sun is on this side. Remember, if I were to turn on the shadows layer, it won't let me until I commit to it. The shadows are going in that direction. So let's make her a little bit smaller. Now, one of the keys here is that her eyes should always be approximately where the horizon is. Right? So if her eyes are there, if I make her bigger, she's closer to me. If I make her smaller, she's further away. She could even be walking way far away over in here. Right? Obviously too far away. So let's make her a little bit bigger, something like that. That'll work. Okay? I'll go ahead and commit to it, and I'm going to turn on the shadows so that I can see the shadows. So the shadows are falling from her away this direction. So when I go to File and then Place, and I drop in her shadow, right here, again, first thing that I have to do is reflect it. So I'm going to go to Edit, Transform, Flip Horizontal. Now her shadow is also going down, so I'm going to go to Edit, Transform, Flip Vertical. Right, so that it's going that way. It actually might be easier if we size the shadow first. So let me go ahead and size this down. Go to Edit, Free Transform. We'll size this down. I'm holding down Shift to keep it in proportion. All right, and now it's approximately right. Then I can go ahead and flip. So I'll go to Edit, Transform, Flip Vertical. We'll line up the shadows so that the feet match up. I'm just using the arrow keys right now. And if you want to see it as a shadow, remember I can just take that layer. Let me take both of these. Well, I'm going to have to change the order here in a second, but let me change that to be on the multiply layer. Now we can see it as a shadow. Okay? But I have to do a skew because it's obviously not in the correct direction right now. So I'm going to go to Edit, Transform, Skew, and I'm going to tweak it first to be a little bit shorter. And I'm going to pull this side over, and I'll pull this side over. I'll pull that side back, and this side back. Remember, it's about noon, so the shadow is going to be a little bit shorter here. I have to make sure that let me zoom in here a little bit so we can see. I have to make sure that the dog paws are matching up fairly well. So there and there. The foot is matching up pretty well. Okay, that looks pretty good as a shadow. If it needs to be a little bit longer, I could adjust it to be a little bit longer. But I'm reasonably happy with it there. Okay? Now that I have that shadow in place, I'll go ahead and say, OK, there's the shadow. I have to do the same thing that I did here against the building with the shadow. So once again, let's take the two people. Let's move them on top of my hue and saturation there. All right, so let's work with just the shadow. Turn everything off except for the shadow. Now in this case, right, there is no white to copy from to cover up part of my drawing. I just have this color. So I need to do a quick selection. Right, and I'm going to select, let me right-click to rasterize the layer first. And I'm going to select the gray right here. And then I'll select inverse. And I'm going to paint the inverse with white. So I'll use the paintbrush, and we'll paint over it in white. I don't have to paint the whole scene. I just have to paint directly around this little shadow here. Something like that. So then we'll use the clone stamp tool. And I need to, let's deselect. And I need to do the back edge of all these shadows with grass. So we'll do clone stamp. And to me, a lot of times it's easier if I create a fill region down here that matches, and I'm going to delete this after the fact. I'm going to match this gray color in here so that I can copy from this nice large block when I'm doing this. So we'll go back with the clone stamp tool. I'm going to hold down Alt to copy from. And let's make this a little bit smaller. And I'm going to work all the way along the back edge of this shadow. So we'll go right along here, right along there. Oh, I'm at the edge of my region, so let's change that. We'll go right along there. Go right along here. We'll go right along there. Whoops, I went beyond my scope. Let me hold down Alt, copy from. Not being quite as careful here because I think I can cover it up rather nicely. Let's cover that up right there. Let's cover it. Oops. Hold down Alt. We're going to copy from, and we'll cover this up. The point is that I'm trying to fuzz up all of these edges a little bit. Right, something like that. Now I need to do the front edge, but before I do that, let's get rid of this square. I'm just going to paint it over with the white. Make that go away. And then once again, I'll do the clone stamp on the front. I'll hold down Alt, and we're going to copy the grass right over the front half of this shadow. This. So maybe like that. Okay. So we have that nicely done. There might be a little bit right in there. Maybe a little bit right in there. Something like that. Now it doesn't look that great here, but when we turn on the background, you can start to see that it blends in very nicely to the background. So we'll go ahead and we'll turn on the woman and the dog. And the last piece of this is we need a little bit of grass covering up the feet. Otherwise, it looks like the feet are just sitting on top. So I'm going to go to the background layer. I'm going to select a bit of the background right around where the feet land. Say something like that. I'll go to Edit, Copy, and then Edit, Paste. And what that gives me is a layer that's on top of everything else. I'll turn it all off so you can see it here. That's just a chunk of that grass. So I just copied a chunk out of the background layer and I pasted it. Let me cut out the feet on this chunk. So I'll turn back on the woman with her feet. And I'm going to go ahead and select. Let's turn this off for a second. I'm going to select the background here. Oops. Down the woman. There we go. I'll select everything. I have to add to it this little area, that little area. Okay, that looks pretty good. Let me select the inverse of it, and I'll turn on the grass, and I'll press Delete, oops, on the grass layer, so that the feet are there. Okay. Now I can use my clone stamp right on top of the grass and cover up her feet just a little bit, and the dog's feet just a little bit. So we'll cover those up, cover that up, and we'll cover that up right there. Okay, so now those are buried. They feel like part of it, maybe just a little bit on the heel, like that. Okay. Now when I turn back on the background, you'll see that it blends in seamlessly to what I was doing. And now we can turn on the shadow. There it is. Oh, the shadow needs to be on top of that piece that I just did. So we have the shadow, we have the dog. Right? Now we can turn on basically everything else. So I'll press Control-0 so we're zooming out. Turn those on. Turn all of these on, except for the color version. And now we have the overall kind of feel of this. Now, it would be nice to push this a little bit further. And I'm going to do that by doing something called the bird brush. I'm going to add some birds to the sky. And all you have to do is go to your Google search and type in Photoshop bird brush. And there's a bunch of them out there. This is the one that I downloaded this morning. It's already loaded in for me. But you could pick any one of these, and it's fine. You just download it. It's usually a zip file, and you'll have to extract it. Okay. Once it's extracted, and I can show it to you on the folder. I'm not going to download it again because it's the same. It extracts as this ABR file, which is a Photoshop brush file. I can then go into Photoshop. I can go to Edit, Presets, Preset Manager. We did this before for the swatches. And with the preset type of brushes, I can click Load, and then I can go find that ABR file and load that ABR file. And you can see down here at the bottom I have a bunch of birds that are brushes. So now all I have to do is with the brush tool, with black as my foreground color, I come up here to my brushes, and there's all of my birds. So I'm going to pick a bird. Let's say this one. And then I'm going to adjust my size down a little bit. Maybe something like that. And we'll drop a bird into the scene. Maybe I'll pick a different set of birds. Maybe something like this. Right, a little flock of birds. And we can put that over there. Now, obviously, there comes a point in time where you can have like 800 birds all through everywhere, and that might be too many birds. Okay, so unless we wanted it to be a horror movie or something, you know, a few birds is tasteful. Too many, too many. Okay, so I've got a couple birds there that are nicely into my scene. Add a little bit of depth to it. I've got the nice little shadows that are here. I've got the building nicely set into the scene. I think maybe I'm going to turn off the X-ray view. I'm not really happy with that. It's a little bit too much. And then I do want to make the hue and saturation, or at least the windows, feel a little bit more like windows. So let's drop that down a little bit more, something like that. So it's just a hint of the reflection instead. Okay. Now that I have all of this done, I'll do File, Save for Web, which is going to save my version of this particular scene. Okay. So it's just kind of a combination of all the stuff that we've been doing with a few different techniques mixed in. Okay. Again, this can be one of your assignment 106s. It's not required to be. You're picking 3 of the elevation, section, plan, and perspective. Right? Pick 3 of those 4 as your assignment 106. All right? Are there any questions No? On Wednesday, we're going to talk a lot about portfolios. I'm not going to give a formal lecture on the portfolios, but I'll bring all the sample portfolios over for you to look at. We'll talk about binding. We'll talk about printing. And I really want to give you the time to work on it and to have me come around and give you any critique if you want it. So the more you have done, the better, because I'll be able to give you feedback on what's working, what's not working, and that sort of thing. Biggest thing is consistencies of spacing, font size, font choice, and those kinds of things page after page. All right? If there aren't any questions, I'll turn you loose. All right.